Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. Chapter 10, in which Passepartout is only too happy to get off with his loss of his shoes. No one is ignorant of the fact that India, this great reversed triangle whose base is to the north and its apex is to the south, comprises a superficial area of 1,400,000 square miles, of which is unequally scattered a population of 180 million inhabitants, and British government exercises a real domination over a certain proportion of this vast country. It maintains a governor-general at Calcutta, governors at Madras, Bombay, and Bengal, and a lieutenant governor at Agra. But British India, properly so called, counts only a superficial area of 700,000 square miles, and a population of 100 to 110 million, tens of millions of inhabitants. It is sufficient to say that a prominent part of the territory is still free from the authority of the Queen, and indeed with some Rajas of the interior, fierce and terrible, Hindus and independence is still absolute. Since 1756, the period which was founded the first English establishment on the spot today occupied by the city of Madras, under the year in which broke out the great Sepoy insurrection, and celebrated East India Company was all-powerful, annexed little by little the various provinces, brought from their rajas, and the price of annual rents, which paid in part, not at all, but it named its governor-general and all its civil or military employees, but now it no longer exists. The British possessions in India are directly under the Crown. Thus the aspect, the manners, and distinctions of race of the peninsula are being changed every day. Formerly they have travelled by all in old means of conveyance, on foot, on horseback, in carts, and in small vehicles drawn by men, in palanquins on the men's back, in coaches, etc. But now steamboats traverse with great rapidity in Indus and Gans, and with a railway crossing the entire breadth of India, and the branching in various directions puts up Bombay at only 3 days from Calcutta. The route of this railway does not follow a straight line across India. The air-line distance is only 1,000 to 1,100 miles, the train going at an average rapidity, which would not take 3 days to make it. But this distance is increased at least one-third by the arc described by the railway rising to Allahabad. In the northern part of the peninsula, in short, these are the principal points of the route of the Great Indian Peninsular Railway. Leaving the island of Bombay, it crosses Salkit, touches the mainland opposite Taha, crosses the chain of western Ghats, runs to the northeast as far as Burhanpur, goes through the near independent territory of Bundelkhand, and as far as Allahabad, turns towards the east, meets Ganges at Bernard, turns slightly aside, descending against to the southeast by Burdian and French town of Chandernagore. It reaches the end of the route at Calcutta. It was half-past 4 p.m. that the passengers of the Mongolia had landed in Bombay, and the train for Calcutta would leave at precisely 8 o'clock. Mr. Fogg then took the leave of his partners, left the steamer, gave his servants directions for some purchases, recommended him expressly at the station before 8 o'clock, with his regular step, which beat the second like the pendulum of astronomical clock. He turned a step towards the passport office. He did not think of any wonders of Bombay, neither the city hall, nor the magnificent library, nor the forts, nor the docks, nor the cotton market, nor the shops, nor the mosques, nor the synagogues, nor the Armenian churches, nor the splendid pagoda of Malia Hill, adorned with two polygonal towers. He would not contemplate either the masterpieces of Elephanta or its mysterious hyphagia, concealed in the southeast harbor, or container grottos of the island of Salkit. Those splendid remains of the Buddhist architecture. No, nothing of that for him. After leaving the passport office, Phileas Fogg quietly returned to the station, and there had dinner served. Among other dishes, the landlord ought to recommend him a certain gibbet of native rabbit, which he spoke in the highest terms. Phileas Fogg accepted the gibbet and tasted it constantly, but in spite of the spice sought, he found it detestable. He rang for the landlord. He said, looking at him steadily, "Is this Rabbit?" "Yes, my lord," replied the rogue bully, "the rabbit of the jungles." "And that rabbit did not mew when it was cold?" "Mew! Oh, my lord, a rabbit, I swear to you." "Landlord," replied Felix Falcorley, "don't swear, and recollect this. In former times in India cats were considered sacred animals. That was a good time. For the cats, my lord, and perhaps also for the travellers." After this observation Mr. Fogg went on quietly with his dinner. A few after Mr. Fogg, the detective Fix also landed from the Mongolia, and hastened to Commissioner of the Police in Bombay. He made himself known in this capacity as a detective, the mission which he was charged, his position towards the robber, and had a warrant of arrest received from London. They had received nothing, and in fact the warrant, after leaving Fogg, could not have arrived yet. Fix was very much out of countenance. He wished to obtain from the Commissioner an order for arrest of this gentleman Fogg. The director refused. The affair concerned the metropolitan government, and let it alone could legally deliver a warrant. This strictness of principles, this rigorous observance of legality, it's easily explained with English manners, which, in the matter of personal liberty, did not allow anything arbitrary. Fix did not persist, and understood that he would have to resign to be to waiting for his warrant, but he resolved not to lose sight of his mysterious rogue whilst he remained in Bombay. He did not doubt that Phileas Fogg would stop there. As we know, it was also Passepartout's conviction, which would give the warrant of arrest the time to arrive. But the last orders which his master had given him on leaving the Mongolia, Passepartout had understood very well that it would be the same with Bombay as with Suez and Paris. That the journey would not stop here, that it would be continued at least as far as Calcutta, perhaps farther. He began to ask himself if, at all, this bet of Mr. Fogg was not really serious. If fatality was not dragging him, he who wished to live at rest, to accomplish the tour of the world in 8 days, whilst waiting, after having obtained some shirt and shoes, took a walk in the streets of Bombay. There was a great crowd of people, and among them Europeans of all nationalities, Persians with pointed caps, Bunions with round turbans, Sinds with square caps, Armenians with long robes, Parsees in black mitres. Festival was being held by the Parsees, the direct descendants of the follower of Zoroaster, who was the most industrious, most civilized, most intelligent, most austere of the Hindus. A race now belongs to the rich native merchants of Bombay. Upon this day they were celebrating a sort of religious carnival, with processions and amusements in which the figured dancing girls dressed in rose-colored gauze embroidered in gold and silver, who danced wonderfully with the decency to sound of viol tam-tams. It is superfluous to insist here whether Passepartout looked at these curious ceremonies, whether his eyes and ears were stretched wide to see and hear, whether his entire appearance was that of the freshest greenhorn that can be imagined. Unfortunately for himself and his master, whose journey he ran the risk of interrupting, his curiosity dragged him farther than that was proper. In fact, after having looked at this Parsee carnival, Passepartout turned towards the station, and, when passing the splendid pagoda of the Malabar, he took an unfortunate notion to visit its interior. He was ignorant of two things: first, that the entrance of the certain Hindu pagodas is formally forbidden to Christians; next, that the believers themselves cannot enter there without having left their shoes at the door. It must be remarked that the British government, for sound political reasons, respecting and causing to be respected in its most significant details of the religion of the country, punishes severely whoever violates its practices. Passepartout, having gone in, without thinking of doing wrong, like a simple traveller, was admiring in the interior of the dazzling glare of the random ornamentation, and was suddenly thrown down on the sacred floor. Three priests, with furious looks, rushed upon him, tore off his shoes and stockings, commenced to beat him, uttering savage cries. The Frenchman, vigorous and agile, rose again quickly. With a blow of his fist and a kick he set the two adversaries, very much hampered by their long robes, rushing on the pagoda with the quickness of his legs. He soon had distanced the third Hindu, who had followed him closely, by mingling with the crowd. In 5 minutes of 8, in few minutes before leaving of the train, hatless and barefoot, having lost in the scuffle the bundle containing his purchases, Passepartout arrived at the railway station. Fix was on the wharf, having followed Fogg to the station. He understood that the rogue was going to leave Bombay. His mind was immediately made up to accompany him to Calcutta and farther, if it was necessary. Passepartout did not see Fix, who was standing in a dark place, but Fix heard him tell his adventures in a few words to his master. "I hope it'll not happen to you again," was all Phileas Fogg said, taking a seat in one of the cars of the train. The poor fellow, barefooted and quite discomfited, followed his master without saying a word. Fix was going to have to get another car, when he thought stopped him, and suddenly modified his plan of departure. "No, I will remain," he said to himself. "The transgression committed upon Indian territory. I have my man." At this moment the locomotive made a vigorous whistle, and the train disappeared into the darkness.